Welcome to the Iowa State Cyclones live here on the Voice of College Football on the Voice of College Football Network. Host Levi Stevenson here, talking about Iowa State's loss to Cincinnati by a 38-30 final. It was frustrating. Be incorrect to say it wasn't. You start out that game, just the opening drive. The opening drive, Cincinnati is just plowing right down the field, and which is not necessarily unusual for the first drive of a game. Teams have their script and they can kind of go with what they already know how to do and all that. Just give me 1 second here. I'm posting the link here. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Yeah, so it was it's not unusual for teams to just drive right down the field to start the game when they've got their beginning of the game script and all that. It's that's not necessarily a big deal. But Iowa State goes on the field, gets a 4 and out. Again, not a big deal. But the problem is that from there on out, from the second possession through the rest of the first half, Cincinnati just dominated. Iowa State at the line of scrimmage, and they were running the ball at like over 10 yards a carry. It was kind of wild. I'm not even sure, not entirely sure what was going on. It was difficult to see. It was difficult to see because we hadn't seen an Iowa State front dominated that way physically. Especially, it was difficult to see in contrast to like last week. Last week, you basically you ran Arizona out of the stadium on the basis of physicality. I mean, they were I would say just out muscled them the whole way, though. The whole way. Never, it was very clear that Iowa State was just a different caliber of football team than Arizona. But now I don't know. Now you just do this, and it is quite frustrating. Sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts. Eventually, as you kind of came down into the end of the first half, the offense started to get moving a little bit, but it was clear. It was clear the injuries had started to pile up and become a major issue, and I just. So I actually, I'm let's see. I didn't post it, but from our account, I think must have been like Matt Nelson probably did. I think because a couple of us run the Twitter account for Wide Right Natty Light. But this actually sums up my feelings pretty well. Let me pull it up here on the screen so you can kind of see it. We'll zoom in on there. Basically, it feels like Iowa State had no business being in that game after the first half, and no business losing it now that it's gone final. And I could not agree with that sentiment anymore. We were all ready to basically just pack it up, go home. At the end of the first half, it was 31-7. I mean, what were you supposed to do? Um, and the defense wasn't stopping anybody. The offense was kind of struggling to move the ball, and they'd had some possessions end empty because partially because you're missing Kyle Conrarty, and you don't have that safety blanket um that just automatic you can pull up from 50 yards and feel good that it's going in. You just don't have that available to you. So that there's a couple times where going for it on fourth down kept the drive moving and it was good. We saw that later in the game where they could have just taken the field goal. But especially early for the most part though, I mean, I would say it was like 4 of 14 on third down or something stupid. Like they were really, really bad on third down today. Partially because I think maybe there wasn't as much desperation on third down because they knew they were pretty much always going to go for it on fourth. But man, having Kyle Conrarty back there to help a few of those possessions end with points changes the whole game basically. And but unfortunately, like that shouldn't have had to be the difference. A hurt kicker shouldn't have been the difference in this game. The defense, well, and I will say the credit should be given to the defense. Credit should be given to the defense for how they played in the second half. For as terrible as they were in the first half, they were really good in the second half. They shut Cincinnati. They were all but shut Cincinnati out, except for the one busted play at the end. But before that, they were holding Cincinnati scoreless. They weren't really moving the ball. They weren't doing anything. Basically, they were doing enough to let the offense get them back into the game, and that was sort of allowed to happen there for a little bit. But there was the possession. Cincinnati runs the speed option out to the right, and they fumble it, and we get the ball back, and then we immediately go 3-and-out, like really quick. I do want to say this was not Rocco's best day. He wasn't bad, but he missed a number of throws today that he just does not miss, that he does not normally miss. There was a lot of times you could tell he was getting a little agitated because you can tell me he's getting agitated because there was a lot of short throws where he just gunned it and it was way too hard in way too short of an area for the receiver to really get a good handle on it. I'm not really sure what was going on early in the game. I thought it looked like we were really, really slow on defense. Like I thought we were moving pretty slowly. I thought we were slow to react. The run fits were not the run fits were not there early, and then it looked like they had some slipping issues, but that was certainly not a cause for like anything like long term. But they got behind. They weren't able to turn around and chase the guy down a couple times because I think there were some grip issues in the first half. But the credit should go to the defense and to John Haycock for making the adjustments in the second half. But boy, howdy, they just dug way too big a hole. I mean, it's not 100% the defense's fault. It's not 100% the coaching staff's fault, because there was a number of times that the coaching staff made significant errors. It's funny. I actually threw it in our wide right Slack earlier, because when they went for the initial 2-point conversion at the end of the half, and we were like, what the hell? But then they got it, and I was like, okay, so you've got it. Now you can continue to go for 2 to keep this thing on pace, to try to get back in 3 scores instead of it being a 4-score game. And after the first touchdown, at the beginning, sorry, I just saw a tweet from Chris Hassel come up here that says, a lot to second guess after Iowa State's first loss, but Iowa State went scoreless on 4 drives inside the Cincy 35. Yeah, so finishing drives in the red zone was terrible today. Not having Kyle sucks, but I mean, in the end, though, you know that you don't have a kicker. You need to be able to convert those into touchdowns, and you can put together a better sequence of play calling. Like I don't want to be that guy that just like comes after the offensive coordinator because the offense left points on the field. I don't want to say that. Like I don't want to be that guy. But this was not Taylor Mauser's best game. I thought in the second half they got too reliant on the run. Not reliant, but they got for some reason, they're down 2-3 scores and they're still running the ball like they're playing with a lead. It was confusing. It was a little irritating because they were like running the ball okay, but they weren't really making a lot of hay in the running game. They were doing enough to make you like make them respect it a little bit, but it wasn't there. Fred says, I still say rush D and penalties in the first half caused this loss. I don't disagree. I mean, the first half D was terrible, especially the rushing defense. But I think the penalties is a big one there. Um, Now Cincinnati's penalties almost single handedly drug Iowa State back into this game. But there was a few penalties early in that game. There was we had a couple different procedure penalties. You had I don't know if there was really much on defense. There was the one. Was there a PI earlier? I'm trying to remember now if there was a defensive penalty earlier or not. But like especially on offense, there was a couple of offensive penalties that killed the drive and really made it difficult to do anything. So it's frustrating. I mean, I'm totally on board here. I'm still in the process here of trying to put together like all this because that tweet that we our main account put out. I think it must have been Matt Nelson or Matthias probably. That yeah, it's like the whole game. You're like, this is bad. We're screwed. We're not going to win this. We got no shot. We're going to get blown out. All this, but then Cincinnati just kept trying to give you the game over and over and over again. They tried to give you the game, and uh, it just didn't. I just that busted play there at the end of the second half that let Cincinnati go back up 2 scores. It was unfortunate, like, but that wasn't like that was really Cincinnati's only like notable play of the second half. Like they really didn't do much of anything. And but that was unfortunately there was like they Iowa State Iowa State dug its own grave basically in the first half. They had largely managed to climb. They're on their way to climbing their way back out of it. And they were mostly the way back out, and then they accidentally pushed the ladder out from underneath themselves with that play. And like unfortunately that play was one that sealed the game, but it wasn't what lost Iowa State the game. The first half defense was unacceptable. I mean, just straight up, it was unacceptable. You have to have a better game plan for what they're doing. And I understand that like both team, like the one of the thing that people were talking about coming to this is that like, Tyson Vite was there and they run the same scheme as us and all this, whatever. And that, I mean, they do run the same scheme as us, but like any advantage that Cincinnati would have been able to gain by like knowing intimately how our defense works would have also been that way for us. We know how their defense works. We should have been able to do that. Sweeney says, honestly, after the first quarter, I'm happy they made a game out of it. Have to lose eventually and better to lose than this game where we weren't favored on the road, but still tough over there. Honestly, I think I'm working my way to that. I'm working my way to that. And I think Iowa State was probably never going to go. I mean, Iowa State was not going to go undefeated. They were going to lose a game at some point. Maybe 2. They might lose another one. Maybe 2 more. I don't know. But it just sucks because I think that's a fair take to say. It's like, hey, they were down 31-7 at halftime. They could have packed it in and just didn't bother with it. And just not bother with any of it. But they fought their way back. Cincinnati tried their damnedest to just give the game back to them. But I would say just didn't take advantage of it. You know, so Rocco just wasn't. He just wasn't he just wasn't what he needed to be. It wasn't as sharp as he needed to be. You know, also not trying to be this guy, but like, was he like 100% after taking that hit earlier in the game? You know, I'm not saying, I promise you, I'm not implying anything by that. I'm not implying that he was hurt and then they obviously just played him anyways. I'm not implying any of that. What I am like, he was off a lot of the game and he missed some throws and a lot of them came after that hit. They might be completely unrelated and maybe he was just fine after the hit, but I know Rocco missed some throws that he doesn't ordinarily miss, especially when you look at like that. When they, you know, that last little, if you want to call it a drive there at the end of the game, you know, they had 20 seconds or 15 seconds or whatever it was. And Ben Bramer's wide open over the middle and he just missed the throw, just missed it. Like Rocco doesn't miss that throw. I don't know what happened, but he just missed it. I mean, he's not perfect. Even Tom Brady missed some throws here and there, but man, that one, that's a confusing one for me. I will say, I do want to actually talk a bit about the end of the game sequence because my expectations were on the floor. I had zero expectation of them being able to do anything. Like I already conceded that we were gonna lose that, and it just is what it is. Like what the outcome that happened is the one I had already accepted at that point. However, there was like 15 seconds left, and Cincinnati is playing way back. You had two chances, really. I mean, the first one you missed the throw on, which wasn't great, but even then, you still had like 6 seconds left. You had time to hit a receiver on the side, let them run forward for 3 or 4 seconds, get out of bounds, and then you have like a 50-yard heave. It would not have been hard for Iowa State to get a couple 10 or 15-yard completions really quick, spike the ball type of thing, spike the ball or get out of bounds. You could have gone with fairly little effort. You could have gotten yourself to the 50-yard line, which for Rocco is more than like, that's plenty close enough for Rocco to take a half decent heave at it. I don't really know why they didn't do that. But the last play kind of pissed me off a little bit. And I don't think I'm not going to read into it too much. I mean, they were, I really am not trying to read into it too much. And I don't think you should, but it is a little irritating to see that they have, they have one play left, they can't really Hail Mary it, but they got to do the hook and ladder thing. They got to do the laterals and all that. And maybe they just are not interested in trying. I don't know. But, Chase Sowell caught the ball and, started running up the field, and he just kind of he didn't keep taking yards. He just kind of stopped and then threw it back to Ben Bramer, who then kind of started going up the field a little bit and then just ran out of bounds. He just ran out of bounds. Didn't even it was very clear to me. It is very clear that either before the play or during the play, someone said, "Hey, just be done. We lost, we're done." And that's frustrating. So I'm not going to read into it too much because I don't want to read into it too much because I mean, the game was basically over and I get not wanting to try doing the lateral thing that you've never practiced. I get it. But I don't, because you could have avoided that by taking a couple easy completions, to the side or up the middle or whatever, just to get, especially up the sideline, to get 10 or 15 yards and get yourself into Hail Mary range. You had the opportunity to do that and they just didn't take it. I don't really know why. There's clock management earlier that was really bad. We had to burn a timeout on not being able to get a play in. This is a great play. So there's a comment in the Discord from Clone Grown 22 says that I thought the Abu run before the stuff sneak was a bad spot. I would like to see that again. Again, this did not change the outcome of the game. I don't think it did. Maybe it did. I don't think it did. Actually, might have. But before the last stuffed QB sneak play, Abu ran forward and then kind of he dove forward for what appeared to me to be a pretty safe first down. And they gave him a really terrible spot. And so that was confusing to me as well. I thought in the moment, I thought he made that, which that was quite puzzling to me. I also didn't like the QB sneak. I didn't like the version of a sneak that we ran. You're just running it out of a single back. Like if you need a yard, like you need a full yard, line up in that Maryland eye and push Rocco through. Why are we like? I don't understand why you would even bother running that sneak in that situation. You need a yard. Like I'm fine with the general call of the QB sneak, but why would you not run one that you have that Maryland eye version of it where you just sit there and you just pile drive Rocco right through that defensive line and into the second, across the first down? Like why was that not the QB sneak they called? That doesn't make any sense to me. There was just a few times this game where like the decisions that were made just didn't make any sense to me. Like none at all. They just I don't know. Like the decision for the touchdown after halftime. The touchdown after halftime where they went for one at the time. Now it was a little annoying that it ended up not mattering because they got it back to one possession. But at the time, kicking the PAT to bring it to like a 9-point game or whatever it was, or to bring it to a 9-point game made no sense. There was no upside to be had with that in that situation. Now, like in hindsight, yes, they were within that, and you could say, well, they might not have got it and all this, whatever. But that's hindsight. In the moment, the decision to kick the extra point didn't make any sense. They had a few different procedural penalties. They had to take a timeout early. Now, I will say that Iowa State did get screwed by they got screwed by the new rule about where they're trying to prevent fake injuries. So then like they make a team take a timeout. Iowa State did get screwed by that. Because Iowa State was in a spot they're obviously not trying to eat clock or anything like that. Like they're not trying to slow things down or anything like that. Iowa State wants to keep the ball moving. And Chase Soul goes down with a cramp right after they spot the ball, and Iowa State has to eat a timeout. They weren't screwed over in the way that like the refs made a mistake. I mean, they officiated the game per the rules, but unfortunately, that's an unfortunate like loophole in that there's a big hole in that rule that I would say got screwed out of a timeout because of that. So that sucks. But again, that was not the reason that Iowa State lost. Iowa State lost because they gave up 31 points in the first half. They gave up like 10 yards rush, 10 yards per carry in the first half, or maybe even a little bit more than that. They had too many penalties. The offense just, Rocco missed a bunch of throws. Abu at time, Abu had some nice plays, but there's a couple other times where they handed the ball off to him. And while I didn't necessarily agree with the decision to hand it off at the time, he could have done a lot more with some of those carries if he was less kind of herky jerky at the line or whatever, and he was being assertive and actually hitting his hole and going through it on time, basically. I'm going to open this up to callers. I'm going to put the link in the comments. Oopsies. There we go. There's a link in the comments there if you guys would like to call in and give your thoughts on the show. Now, I will preface this by saying that if you want to call in and you are dissatisfied, that's great. We can talk about it, but my rule here though is going to be that we're not going to do this big tirade of cussing and stuff like that. Which if this was on Wide Right and this is a pre-recorded thing and I could edit some stuff out, then go for it. I'm certainly not one to start throwing rocks in my glass house of being a potty mouth. But let's have, if you come here and express dissatisfaction, anything you want, let's talk about it. But keep the discussion reasonable and measured, and try not to be ridiculous. I don't want to be that kind of Colin show. So, and maybe no one's interested in talking about this because it was just a miserable game. And that's okay too. But if anybody does want to come, want to call in, be happy to talk through this stuff with you, as long as we're all measured and reasonable about our takes and stuff like that. I saw some in the Wide Right Night Discord. I saw in our game thread, I saw a few messages in there that were a little hasty, I would say. There's one person in there that was saying that Taylor Mauser shouldn't be back next season, which I think is I think that's a crazy take. Taylor Mauser, over the course of his career at Iowa State, Taylor Mauser is easily the most aggressive and creative play caller we've had. He's not perfect. He's still young. He's still learning. He's still very, very early into his coordinating career. If your takeaway from this game is that somebody needs to lose their job for anything that went wrong, you need to take a step back, take a breather, and just go do something else besides watch college football. Go outside, go to an apple orchard, go to a pumpkin patch, do yard work, whatever you feel like. I don't really care. Just step back, hop out of the chat, get off social media. I promised you, Iowa State fans, the sun will come up tomorrow. This is still a good football team. They're injured. They have a lot of injuries to deal with, but in my mind, that we're still in a better spot than we were last year, as injury wise. The defense was still a lot better in that second half after they made the adjustments, and the offense can be good enough to beat anybody. They just need to do it, which is not particularly enlightened analysis, I guess. But this is still a good football team. It is, and they're going to win a bunch of games. They're probably still going to win. I would say probably at least 9 games. I would say, because you can beat Colorado on the road. You can beat BYU at home. You can beat Arizona State at home. TCU on the road's tough. I mean, you can win that game, but TCU on the road's tough. Kansas is going to be a tough one, but that one you can win. And Oklahoma State is really bad. So, you've got tough games left, but everything that you wanted to do is still in front of you. A Big 12 championship is still in front of you. A playoff berth is still in front of you. Iowa State didn't lose any long-term goals by losing this game today, I guess, save for unless Cincinnati runs the table or something and sneaks in over and gets a tiebreaker over Iowa State, I guess. But I don't know if I would say they've got they were really good in the first half offensively. They had a good game plan for Iowa State, but I would not call that a world-beating team. Their defense leaves some to be desired, and they are wildly undisciplined. Their penalties will actually cost them a game. Okay, this actually, I will say though, this is one that I think we need to keep an eye on. Carson Hansen went down in the first half with an injury after. So it was on the interception that was not. They picked it off in the end zone. It was ruled as pass interference, but on the way back at the end of that play, Carson Hansen was somehow caught up in something. I don't know if he was on the tackle or what, but he went to the locker room and never returned. This is something to keep an eye on. I'm not this. I think Abu has a lot of talent. I think he's super athletic. But right now, Carson Hansen is the better running back. He just is. He's just the more effective running back right now. And you could argue that there was a couple spots, but a couple spots there that you wish that Iowa State had Carson Hansen. Maybe on that sneak that got stuffed. If you have Carson Hansen in there, maybe you hand it off to him up the, just and you go up the A gap and just run A gap power there. There's a couple times where Abu, danced around a little too much, didn't do what he needed to do to get it done. He dropped a pass. He ran an angle route and then dropped the pass up the seam. It ended up not mattering because the next carry he went and got the first down. But there was some stuff where like Abu, if Carson Hansen's out, Abu needs, like, this is when Abu needs to make the jump to being the lead bell cow type back that can be the guy through the whole game. Like, he has to make the jump. He just does. This is, if Hansen is out, this is his time. And we're going to see some more Dylan Lee. This also might mean maybe we're going to see some River Peppers. We'll see if, I don't know if he's healthy. He's not on the injury list right now, but we'll see if River Peppers is healthy. But we're going to see Abu Sama. We're going to see Dylan Lee. So, it's frustrating too, because, if Iowa State is healthy, or, at least roughly as healthy as Cincinnati was that game, like, we're only missing, if you have just John Tez back that game, early, maybe like if you have John Tez back, maybe that first ball that Sorsby completed down the sideline, which honestly, Trey Bell did a really nice job defending that. He did a great job defending it. He did about as good as he could. But maybe John Tez defends it a little bit better. Maybe John Tez picks that off. Maybe there's a couple other plays throughout the game where, maybe John Tez can defend it better and he can do a better job. It ended up not being PI because the receiver stepped out of bounds, but David Coffey was in for was in a little bit when Quentin Taylor left with an injury. I do want to shout out Quentin Taylor though, because even though most of the defense was bad, they were through at Quentin Taylor a number of times today, and he was very, very good. And maybe John Tez defends that better. Maybe he picks that off. I feel like that was an interceptable ball if he had cranked his head around. So maybe you have one of those guys back, but injuries are once again piling up for Iowa State. I don't know if there's a lot of them that they could have done a lot about. Jeremiah Cooper's was kind of a freak one in a non-contact drill. John Tez got rolled up on by another defender. I don't know if there's a lot that Iowa State could have done to prevent a lot of these or any of them, but it is what it is. Fred, were you surprised at the Mansky appearance, not the Rocco and the tent one, but the 4? I thought that was weird. I don't really know why they just brought him out to run. Why they just brought him out to just run a couple QB powers. I thought that was strange. I mean, maybe it's just to protect Rocco a little bit more, but weirdly enough, this is not actually an unprecedented thing for Iowa State. If you'll remember, Brock Purdy's first ever game action was a single QB power call against Ohio that year that went for 0 yards. Or is it Akron? Akron? I think it was Akron. It was not Ohio. It was Akron. So they played Akron in 2018, and Brock Purdy's first ever snap as a Cyclone was a 2-yard loss on a QB power against Akron. And then he never came in the game again. I think that was if I remember correctly, that was the game they had all the yellow stuff for Thelia Bargina Rosamena. So it's kind of weird. That's not unprecedented for Iowa State, but I thought the decision to bring in Mansky to run a couple of QB powers felt weird because I think for the defense, that was probably fairly easy to telegraph. The carries didn't really go anywhere. They didn't do anything. So I'm not really sure. Excuse me. I'm not really sure why they brought Alex Mansky in for those. I don't think it helped. I can't imagine Alex Mansky got a lot out of that. Like, why not bring in Connor Moberly? I mean, I understand Mansky's got some more redshirt. Like, I think he should have 2 more redshirt games left, maybe 3, or you either have 2 or 1. I know because he came in South Dakota, obviously, then that one. I can't remember if he's come in another game or not. Has 1 or 2 redshirt games left, and like ideally, yeah, you can use as many of those as possible. But I mean, if you're just running QB power with a quarterback to do something, like, why not bring in Moberly? He's a good runner, and they've done it before. But either way, I don't I don't really like the call. I thought it was I was confused by that. Uh LZ goal at 35 says that healthy Cyclones would have punished the Cincy penalties more than what happened. A good effort, but the difference is noticeable. Good game to grow from. Um, I mean, yeah, I like as a general concept, I agree with you. Uh, I will say, I mean, if you look at the depth chart, though, most of the injuries are on defense and they're not starters. My, it's not even. I don't know if it's a hot take, but it's like I don't want to discount the impact of injuries, especially at the corner spot. Losing two, all Big 12, maybe even all American caliber corners in a week, that sucks. I mean, that objectively sucks. But the corners really weren't the issue today. It was the run defense. And Dom Orange was healthy. Thomas McDonough is healthy. Von Troy Malone is healthy, I believe. The front seven's healthy. There aren't any linebackers out. Carson Willich was back, and he got blasted by the running back a couple times. The injuries are hard. And like that makes things more difficult. Objectively, it just does. It makes things more difficult, especially at corner. However, the injuries to the bulk of the injuries on the team are not to guys that were starting. At best, they were depth pieces. Most of them were not gonna play. So that my opinion though, so basically what I'm saying is that like I don't think the injuries were as aside from the Carson Hansen thing, the Carson Hansen going down, absolutely. I think it absolutely affected the outcome of this game. I think Iowa State is able to convert some of those things like that. Like the one where Abu was ruled short. We all thought he made it because he dove. That's a Carson Hansen style run all day. Just right up the A gap, lower your shoulder, get through, fall forward, get the first down all day. With Carson Hansen, maybe that's a no doubt first down. But aside from the two corners, which like I said, I don't think the corners were really the difference today. The part of the defense that struggled the most, which was the front six, the defensive line and the linebackers, to my knowledge, unless they're hiding stuff from the injury report, are pretty much healthy. So that is a little weird. Were the linebackers playing soft and back in the first half to help cover injuries in the backfield? Is that why they ran for 1,000 yards in the first half? To be honest, that's not what I mean, I'll have to go back and rewatch the game. I don't want to, but I'll have to go back and rewatch the game. But I did not see it as I did not see it at all as a situation where like it was a schematic thing where we were playing too far back or like we were playing too soft or we were sitting back in coverage. I did not perceive that to be what was happening. What I saw was our defensive line losing their individual physical matchups. The Cincinnati offensive line was doing anything they wanted to. The receivers were blocking really well. The tight ends were blocking really well. The Cincinnati earned their running game in the first half by their offensive line being really good. The flip side of that coin is that the defensive line and then the linebackers should have been a lot better. There was a couple times I felt like we went with a little bit lighter box. Maybe they went with two linebackers instead of three type of thing, but then they had a nickel there or something like that. There was a couple times I thought we went with like a little bit light of a box and they ran right into it. But I think it was less so about that, and it was more so about the defensive line just putting together a really poor showing in the first half. They were getting pushed around all over the place. And we saw in the second half, they were quite a bit better. Like Dominic Orange showed up. I thought he was, like I said, I'll have to go back and look because sometimes it's hard to watch. It's hard to pay attention to those guys and also just still watch the football game. But I felt like the first half for Dom Orange was pretty sleepy. I didn't think Dom Orange had a big impact on the first half. Obviously, it's based on how much they were running the ball. But the second half, he immediately, I thought he was much better. I thought the defensive line was better. The linebackers did a much better job of maintaining gap discipline. I thought they did a much better job of doing that. I thought the tackling was a lot better. I didn't see nearly as many broken tackles in the second half. Um, LZ Goalie says, I remember hearing JW on the radio before the game saying how they were Cincy was the two times offensive line of the week for the Big 12. They seem strong. I mean, from what I saw, Cincy's O line is pretty good. I mean, I don't think it was just a matter of Iowa State's defensive line not being good enough. They weren't good enough, but Cincy's O line made them not be good enough. I mean, they did a good job on their own. I mean, credit to in the first half, Cincy played just really, really good football. Like that was about I don't know if Cincy will play another half of football this season better than that first half. Partly, a good chunk of that was because Iowa State's defense was not where they needed to be. Part of it was really good scheme. Brennan Sorsby had a couple really nice throws. I also thought Brennan Sorsby missed a lot of throws, like a lot of throws. He was, I was not blown away by his passing ability. I thought, as a runner, as an improviser, I thought he was really good. I was not blown away by his throwing ability. He missed a lot of throws, and especially missed a lot of deep balls long. So overall, I mean, the thing I'm taking away from this is I really don't ever expect Iowa State's defense to play like that again. Because like I said, I think the injuries are a very they matter. I'm not saying they don't matter. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is the guys that are out, like their loss was not the major thing that was felt. The two times they only really burnt the corners like once or twice. And the one time Trey Bell was actually still playing pretty good coverage. It was just a really good throw by Sorsby and a really good catch and concentration to get the foot in by the receiver. The last one was Jamison Patton, actually, unfortunately. That was a blown coverage on that. And that was after, that was Jamison Patton on that one. And that was after they faked an RPO, basically. They essentially faked a Sorsby run that, which we bid on super hard because I think we were just terrified of Sorsby's legs. But because of that, the safety, bid up and let up that deep pass. But I really don't think we'll see another performance that bad out of Iowa State. I think this defense is quite a bit better than what they showed in the first half. And in the second half, they were really good. But they need to get better. They need to get better at not allowing teams to just blast downfield on the first drive of the game. Letting a team score on their first drive sucks. It's a good way to get. One, they got out, or they got behind early, and then, from there you're playing catch up. And a lot of the season, Iowa State has only played from in front. This was the first time that they had to play from behind all season. Fred says the only injury which really hurt us today was at the kicker position, and Hanson. The other guys coming in stepped up pretty good. That's really where I was kind of going with this. Is I thought the guys that filled in, I thought Quentin Taylor was really good. I thought Quentin Taylor was awesome. To me, that showed that he's the next guy up for this corner position. Now, John Tez and Coop will both be back next year. I think Trey Bell will be too. Next year, Iowa State's going to have 4 very, very good corners. Iowa State's going to be incredibly strong at the corner position next year. And that's not including David Coffey and Ben Nagoye come up. Iowa State's going to have quite a few corners available for next season, assuming, I'm barring transfers and stuff like that. But, they're going to be really strong. But I thought everybody that filled in did a nice job. Hanson being out hurt, because I think that affected our third down play calling a few times, fourth down play calling. Having that guy that can just hammer up through the line and get a few yards pretty reliably, you miss that. And then Kyle Conradi, unfortunately, that one really reared its ugly head in this one. Against Arizona, you were able to avoid it because you're able to move the ball fairly consistently. You're able to move the ball pretty consistently, and you just never really got in a position where you had to start nailing field goals. And you got to this one, and there was a bunch of times. There's at least 4 drives, like, as Chris Hassel tweeted, he said Iowa State went scoreless on 4 drives inside the Cincy 35. And if you can replace all 4 of those drives with 4 field goals, even 3 field goals is enough to win the game. 4 field goals, 4 field goals get you a full 4-point win. That's the thing here is missing Conradi sucks. And it doesn't, missing Jace Gilbert sucks too, because even if you didn't have Conradi, if you had Jace Gilbert, they would have tried a few of those. Like, I think they would have tried it from 35 or something like that. They would from 35 yards, you're more comfortable. You're probably still not taking a 50-yarder, but from 35 or 40, you're probably at least trying it with Jace Gilbert. But just not having Conradi there hurts. Because that's just a guy, it's a weapon. You can tee it up. He can tee one up from 60 and you're fine with it. Like, it's no big deal. So I hope they get Conradi back sooner rather than later. You don't want to force it too early and have him re-aggravate something. But and my guess is that they wait till after the bye week, because you're at Colorado next weekend and then you're back on a bye week. If you can get through Colorado, if you think you can get through Colorado without having, your really like elite kicker, if you can get through Colorado without having Kyle Conradi, this is, then you can get to the bye week and you can get Kyle back for BYU, which I think you're really going to want him for BYU. So I would be, unless his injury just really isn't a big deal, I think we would get him back for BYU, but I don't need him pushing something on Saturday. I don't need anything happening like at Arkansas State where we think he's okay and then he tries one thing and then it's clear that he's very hurt, type of thing. Like, I don't need any of that. I want to re-aggravate anything this Saturday. So hopefully you go into Colorado and you feel all right about it, and you can go through and try to win that game without a kicker, which sucks. But Hansen is definitely the injury to keep an eye on this week. If he's out for Colorado, things get interesting. Now, again, that is not to say that Abu Sama can't be really good. That's not to say that he can't figure it out and be Iowa State's guy and be the bell cow. I think he's talented and athletic enough to do that. But he needs to prove that he can be an every down back. So Hansen is the big one, though. I am a little worried. I like my optimism for a Big 12 title game berth goes down if Hansen is out, because Abu Sama, like I said, I don't need to keep going about Abu. Dylan Lee, I think, is a good back. He's not the hammer that Carson Hansen is. Like, he's not that kind of player. So, maybe things the scheme changes a little bit. Some options that were available to you are no longer available. We'll have to see how that all shakes out. Hopefully it's not a long-term thing for Carson. Hopefully he's back for Colorado, but if he's not, hopefully he's back for BYU or something. I don't know. Him not even like coming out of the locker room in the second half is worrying. I do not like that. And I feel bad because like this team is good enough. Like, when it's healthy, this team is good enough to win the Big 12. Absolutely it is. The question really is how many injuries and which injuries can they sustain and continue to be that. But it just sucks because last season we had so many injuries. The injury bug was just out of control, and now it's rearing its head again. The injuries don't feel like anything they can do much about. Like, how do you stop a defender from rolling up on the back of your star cornerback's leg and tearing his ACL? How do you stop an ACL injury in non-contact drills? Like, how do you you can do stuff. There's things you can do in your athletic training to help reduce the risk for like muscle injury, for like reduce the risk for injuries, and like especially like muscle injuries, like conditioning, helping guys condition in a way so that they become less susceptible to, straining a hamstring or straining or pulling a hamstring, or, whatever, that kind of thing. You can do things to help, for injury prevention, but like, I mean, there's not a lot you can do with your knee ligaments. You can build up strength around the knee, but in the end, that doesn't save your knee for getting, from getting rolled up on by a 300-pound dude and having it twist the wrong way, or, getting tackled weird or whatever. You can't, there's not a lot. I mean, football's a contact sport. Injuries happen, but unfortunately, Iowa State's just been severely bit by the injury bug the last 2 seasons. And I'll be curious to see, like, if anything comes out of that, because it reminds me, it was the early 2010s Portland Trailblazers for the NBA. They were like, they had some talent. You had Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, and you had a number of other guys, and they were always like a pretty plucky, like decent team, but they always were just riddled with injury problems, tons of them. And it was in the 2000s too. Like, they always had like half a dozen guys out with muscle injuries and stuff like that. And eventually they basically hired a brand new training staff and overhauled everything, and just changed how they practice, how they eat and stuff like that or whatever. And it helped a lot. And then they began, improved from one of the most injured teams to one of the least injured teams. But basketball isn't a high impact sport. Like, I mean, it's a contact sport, but it's not in the same neighborhood as football. There's not, I don't know what you want an athletic trainer to do to prevent that kind of thing from happening, to prevent someone from, getting rolled on weird at the bottom of a pile after they bring a runner down and then someone falls on their shoulder weird or something like that. I don't know what you want. I don't know what you want to happen there. Like, I don't know what you're expecting out of them. So it's frustrating to see these good teams be continually just hampered by injuries over and over and over again. But a little adversity didn't hurt anybody. This is the first time they've had to play from behind. Hopefully they learn some lessons. Rocco certainly knows that he needs to be better. I would expect, I think they'll come out against Colorado with the fire lit under them. They're going to, we're not going to let this be another, 2-game skid. We're going to go on the road. We're going to take care of business. We're going to put away a Colorado team that's really, really struggling to find its identity. That's a winnable game. And that way we can go into the bye week off of a win. We can get ready for BYU. So I haven't seen anybody call in, but I think we'll probably wrap it up for today. I appreciate everybody that tuned in. I appreciate all the comments and the conversation for everybody. Unfortunately, not a good day for Iowa State. For anybody, I don't know why you wouldn't know this already, but Iowa State lost 38-30 to Cincinnati. Be back next weekend on the road in Boulder, Colorado. I will not be there, but I know that CycloneFanatic is doing some stuff out there. I think like with the Alumni Association, all that. So if you're going out to the game in Boulder, there should be plenty of stuff to do out there. But the important thing to remember, the sky's not falling. Iowa State is still a good football team. There's still everything they wanted, everything we still want to do, win the Big 12 title, get to the playoff, all that is all still in front of you. All of it is. But they obviously have things to work on. They obviously did not. The defense did not have a good game plan for today. It's a good day to just sit back. You can watch some other college football or go do anything else. Doesn't matter. But I appreciate y'all for tuning in. I'll be back again on this channel on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central per usual to talk. We'll talk a little bit about this game, and then we'll talk about Colorado. Tuesday mornings on the Wide Right Natty Light podcast feed, you'll have it might be Wednesday morning this next week because I think I've got a thing on Tuesday now, but or I think I've got a thing on Monday, so it might be Wednesday before we get it out. But you'll have Down the Pipe and Natty Light Wednesday nights, the nightcap. You'll also have the light cast. We've still got lots of stuff going on. The sky's not falling. We will be back with all sorts of Iowa State content next week. So appreciate everybody for tuning in, for everybody commenting, all the conversation. Everybody have a great rest of your Saturday, and go Cyclones.